Hello students. Today we are going to speak about a particular movement, a cinematic movement of Indian cinema called Indian New Wave. Now, in this particular episode, we are going to talk about how the monotony of the garish popular Hindi cinema led to the need for change, a change in aesthetics, that is, both in form as well as style. Now, a growing interest of the political among young filmmakers resulted in what we call as Indian New Wave or the New Wave movement, which draws inspiration, that is, it heavily draws inspiration from French Nouvelle Vague as well as the other film movement, Italian Neorealism. The episode will also look at in depth into some of the key figures, that is, the key authors of Indian New Wave movement. That is, figures such as Mrinal Sen, filmmakers such as Mrinal Sen, Shyam Benegal and even Satyajit Ray. Now, with the advent of the studio system in the 1930s, a certain kind of Hindi cinema was becoming extremely popular. Now, what was this kind? Popularly, they can be called as an all-India Hindi song and dance film, where the song and dance took an important place in the course of the film. And even though I am not denying the fact that there were regional centers of production, such as in Calcutta and Madras, but the mainstream commercial cinema surpassed the other regional centers both in terms of the scale, that is, in terms of the number of films made, as well as popularity. Now, almost everywhere among the urban audience and among the young filmmakers, there was a need for representation of reality. That is, reality in both in terms of the narration as well as style. This slowly grew into a movement that then started a new era of Hindi cinema, that is, with its strong inclination towards the portrayal of realism. A new generation of filmmakers emerged, and these filmmakers had the interest in the political. That is, one, to represent reality, and the second, to make inherently political films. This led to a need for a kind of national cinema which was outside the bounds of the commercial mainstream. That is, films which were not primarily only cocktail musical sort, the form which was extremely popular prior to Indian New Wave. But there was a yearning to move to a certain kind of serious kind of narrative. And also, there was this urgent call and need for a different kind of audience who would appreciate such bent towards realism, such political films, and also a different sort of cinema, which later came to be known as parallel cinema. Now, this was possible due to certain technological invention, without which the Indian New Wave as a film movement would not have been capable of surviving. These are the availability of newer equipments such as lighter handheld cameras, portable sound and recording devices, which made it possible for the filmmakers to step out of the restrictive walls of the studio and rather shoot in outdoor location, broadening their cinematic exploits. It is at this point of time that stalwarts such as Bimal Roy and Satyajit Ray toiled to make films like Do Bigha Zameen, 1953, and Pather Pachali, 1955. Now, these films were inspired by themes as well as methods from the Italian neorealist film movement, as well as films like Bicycle Thief made by Vittorio De Sica. Now, when I talk about themes as well as methods, what I mean by themes is basically the authentic portrayal of daily lives of working people. Now, this was a recurrent theme in many of New Wave films. As well as when I talk about methods, I am stating facts like low budget, location shooting, non-professional actors. Now, film society. I'm sure all of you have heard of this term. The first film society was founded in Bombay in 1943. And Satyajit Ray himself founded a film society in Calcutta in 1947. Now, I would like you students to go back to your house and speak to your parents about the film society movement, which started from late 1940s and existed till about end of 1970. Now, what were these film societies? These film societies were a sort of exhibition place where different kind of cinema, and including world cinema, were made available to people who were not just interested in the entertaining cinema, but were also actively wanted to engage with cinema. Now, through the operation of these societies, people could see the best of Indian cinema. And also, they had access to best of foreign film. So, these film societies were actually it played a very important role in the New Wave movement, that is Indian New Wave movement, because it is in these film societies that a different kind of audience were also generated, which in other terms we call as cinephilia, right? People who had active engagement with cinema. Also, it was not just about, these film societies were not just about watching a film, but there were also discussions surrounding, a discourse surrounding the film, which were then discussed among the members of the various film societies. With the start of such a strong film society movement, coupled with a good number of film scholars, that is, literate middle class audience, what I was calling the rise of cinephilia, which definitely the film societies and then later film festivals played an important role in the formation of this cinephilia. Now, they generated, and also, the kind of material, that is the kind of writings which were available of film scholars like Andre Baza and Sergei Eisenstein also made these people, that is people who were viewing the film, the audiences, more and more interested in European art cinema. With the release of experimental landmark films such as Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, there was a need for stylistic exploration, which challenged, and it's not just in India, it challenged it elsewhere as well, the classical norms of the studio-led filmmaking. And definitely, Indian New Wave draws heavily and once again was inspired heavily from the French New Wave movement. And it is at this point that the filmmakers, that is the filmmakers of Indian New Wave film movement, decided to not only make films which stated different stories in terms of the politics being at the center of the narrative, but also they wanted to draw attention in terms of their films and in terms of the element of formal maturity. They kind of tried making films, that is, crafting the films which drew attention to the very process of filmmaking itself. The first International Film Festival of India was held in Bombay, Madras and Calcutta by Film Division in 1952. It is in these festivals that films like Vittorio De Sica's Bicycle Thief, Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon 1950 and Robert Bresson's Diary of the Country's Priest were seen by several young filmmakers, as well as the young literate audience, which was now becoming in the process interested in European art cinema. Also, these films were now, that is in the festival circuit, shown for the first time to the large Indian audience that created waves among the young filmmakers, who were exasperated, as I have said earlier, that who were exasperated with the mindless song and dance dramas made at that point of time. My mid-1960s Ray's Apu trilogy had also become very well known throughout the world. It was winning several awards, including awards at the Cannes Film Festival. The growing interest in making of art cinema soon also led to the formation of the film division as well as the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. The Film Training Institute of India, FTII, and yes, I know that all of you, the film students, aspire to be a student of FTII someday. Now, this was also set up in Pune in 1961, and the National Film Archive of India was established in 1964. However, one important factor which led to which helped or contributed the new wave in a big way was the introduction or the initiation of the government body called Film Finance Corporation in 1969. Now, Film Finance Corporation decided to finance films like Manikal's Uski Roti and Mrinal Chen's Bhuvan Shom, which almost kind of, bring the era of new wave to its maturity. The two films, that is Uski Roti as well as Bhuvan Shom, along with Basu Bhattacharya's Sara Akash, excelled in incorporating the familiar travels of the rural India. Now, by then it became clear that the main objective of the Film Finance Corporation was to go outside the commercial circuit and also help filmmakers who wanted to work outside the commercial circuit and fund what we can, in common words or in lay words, say as thinking man's cinema. What we can, in simpler manner, we can say as parallel cinema or art cinema. The films which not just wanted to entertain, but rather wanted to portray a sort of realism, what can be called as social realism. Filmmakers such as Kumar Sahani, Girish Karnad and Shyam Benegal had cemented their reputation in breaking away from the studio-driven escapist clutter and proved to be the prime exemplars or the most recounted name under the broad gamut of Indian New Wave. One may note here that Shyam Benegal's early ventures were, however, financed by Blaze Enterprise, an organization that had made its fortune by displaying advertisement slides in movie halls. So it is filmmakers like Kumar Sahani, Girish Karnad and Shyam Benegal who cemented their reputation by kind of drawing their work outside the studio-driven escapist clutter and making this sort of different kind of cinema with a different sort of aesthetic sensibilities. Others like G. Arvindan, Adur Gopal Krishnan, John Abraham were important personalities related to the Indian New Wave movement. However, I won't be hesitant to say that it was Shyam Benegal's oeuvre that made the new cinema movement an object of national attention. Now soon, this trend of parallel cinema, what we call as parallel cinema, started with actors such as Nasruddin Shah, Smita Patel, Om Puri, all of whom eventually navigated from per se mainstream cinema into the alternative cinema and vice versa. So these stars are kind of very much associated, as much as the directors, it is these stars who are also associated with this particular film movement. In context of new wave films, I would like to begin by talking about a particular film which is a favorite of mine, that is Mrinal Sen's Bhuvan Show. Now, its importance cannot be undermined as it is the one that in certain ways started it all. It was hugely successful because it combined new with the familiar, the Indian with the Western, and the history with the allegory.
बंगाल, सोनार बंगाल, महान बंगाल, विचित्र बंगाल। हमारी तो सीधी सी बात है, अगर हमारी मांगे पूरी नहीं हुई, हम बंगाल के सिनेमा कर्मचारी सिनेमा नहीं चलने देंगे, कभी नहीं चलने देंगे। इसी बंगाल के हैं भुवन सोम, 16 आने खरे। बरसों बंगाल के बाहर रहने के बाद भी जिनका बंगालीपन नहीं गया। भुवन सोम, एक विशुद्ध बंगाली।
The film Bhuvan Shom is about Mr. Shom, that is the big bad bureaucrat, and the corrupt ticket collector's soon-to-be wife, Gauri. Now, both of these characters represent certain archetypes and are representative of their class. And the film itself plays out as an episodic narrative with Mr. Shom finally pardoning Gauri's fiancé, one of the subordinate, that is his subordinate, in the Indian Railways. He pardons him for taking bribes and thus is subsequently reformed in the hands of the innocent rustic belle Gauri. Now, the film is important because the thematic binary, it depicts, that is, the binary in terms of the character of Gauri and the character of Mr. Shom, is also coupled with the French New Wave style of shooting. It uses various in terms of style, it uses freeze frames, montages, jump cuts, discontinuities, artificially accelerating and deaccelerating the frames, sound visual disjunctions, camera work, documentary newsreel type footage, and many such instances, all intended to draw audience attention to the filmmaking process itself.
वो देखो, वो उधर।
In a number of other films in this phase, that is in Sen's career, Mrinal Sen's career, he constantly projects this sort of binary which he depicts in Bhuvan Shom. That is the binary of class representative. To name, that is his Calcutta trilogy. Interview, Calcutta 71 and Podatik 1973. These films basically talk about the exploitation of the one group by the other and its resistance. They are also landmark films in terms of the experimentation in narrative as well as filmmaking style. This phase is also one of the most politically charged phase of Mrinal Sen's filmic career. On the other hand, Ray's Calcutta trilogy, Protidwandi, Shimabodho and Jano Arunye also indulge in binaries. However, binaries are between the character and their moral consciousness. The inner dilemma of the characters is often fleshed out by using new wave conventions.
What would you regard as the most outstanding and significant event of the last decade?
The war in Vietnam, sir.
more significant than the landing on the moon?
I think so, sir.
Could you tell us why you think so?
Because the moon landing, you see, we weren't entirely unprepared for the moon landing. We knew it had to come sometime. We knew about the space flights, the great advances in space technology. So we knew it had to happen. I'm not saying it wasn't a remarkable achievement, but it wasn't unpredictable. The fact that they did land on the moon.
Do you think the war in Vietnam was unpredictable?
Not the war itself, but what it has revealed about the Vietnamese people, about their extraordinary power of resistance. Ordinary people, peasants, and no one knew they had it in them. And this isn't a matter of technology, it's just plain human courage, and it takes your breath away.
Are you a communist?
I don't think one has to be one in order to admire Vietnam, sir.
That doesn't answer my question. However, you may go now.
Lymphatics of the female breast, if you remember, begins with the plexus around the gland itself. Now this plexus which we note is quite different from the lymphatics which drain the central region of the gland. But the gland at its central region is
In the sequence we just saw, we see that Ray is very successful in showing with a stylistic flashback what is going on inside the character Siddharth's mind. It is made apparent that Siddharth's sorry state of joblessness has made him thoughtful. It has made him thoughtful about some of the basic needs of his life. He too wishes to have a woman in his life. He wishes to get married, have a job, and lead a pleasurable life. However, at that particular moment, very similar to the crossroad, which just appears as one of the shot in this particular sequence, the character himself, that is Siddharth himself, is typically unaware of where life would ultimately take him. Throughout the course of the New Wave movement, the one filmmaker with whom the movement was nationally recognized was Shyam Benegal. Shyam Benegal's directorial debut, Ankur, won him accolades, and it was included as a second best feature film in the National Film Awards in 1974.
यहाँ रहता कौन है?
यहाँ सरकार कौन भी नहीं रहता.
तू कहाँ रहती है?
मैं सरकार वो ताड़ के झाड़ के नीचे वो झोपड़ी है ना, वहीं.
कितने दिनों से काम कर रही है?
मैं सरकार कुछ ही दिनों से हूँ.
और कौन लोग रहते हैं यहाँ?
यहाँ सरकार वो खेतों में कामा करने वाले मजदूर रहते हैं. इस खेत के पीछे सब उनकी झोपड़ियाँ.
बावड़ी कहाँ है?
बावड़ी सरकार घर के पीछे नजदीक है.
चल दिखा मुझे.
The main intention behind the new cinema movement, thus, was to create films that leave a mark on every level, a signature of a sort, an authoritarian figure driving the film's offbeat narrative, as well as serving a food for thought for an audience that is weary of the stunt logic of the Hindi popular cinema. By late 1980s, with the decline of the left-wing politics after the end of the Cold War and the cutback in the government funding for filmmaking, New Wave movement started dying down. Also, with the proliferation of the video piracy, the expansion of the cable and satellite television, as well as the pressing competition from Hollywood, the future of the Indian film industry fell into the hands of certain established stars, as well as influential big-budget producers. In 2013, the National Film Development Corporation started its label Cinema of India, specifically to promote and distribute its parallel cinema films produced by it since the 1960s. This was in an attempt to continue encouraging new talents involved with low-budget independent films made in the contemporary times.